You're listening to the Really Useful Podcast. This is the tech podcast for technophobes from makeuseof.com. My name is Christian Corley, and joining me is one of my fellow editors from the site. It's Gavin Phillips. Gavin, do you feel as though technology isn't working for you?
Oh, all the time. But thankfully, we have makeuseof.com and the Really Useful Podcast to help guide us through the turbulence and lead us into the clear skies once more.
I'm using that on the trailer. We were just talking, weren't we, beforehand, about here in the UK, we've just done Halloween, and the following week we did Bonfire Night. Now, Halloween is a thing that when I was a kid, and I mean, there's a few years between myself and Gavin, when I was a kid, Halloween wasn't something that you really did. You might have carved out a turnip because pumpkins were in short supply in the UK in those days and bunged a candle in it. There might have been a few kind of scary things gone up in windows, and there might have been a bit of door-to-door. But it wasn't trick or treat. It was the sky is blue, the grass is green. Do you have a penny for Halloween? If you don't have a penny, a halfpenny will do. If you don't have a halfpenny, then God bless you. Stroke. We'll put your windows through. And sometime in the 90s, this evolved into a sort of US echo of Halloween, which certain people of my generation, and I'm probably one of them, aren't completely on board with. And then a week later, we have this bonfire night, which is basically when we celebrate burning Catholics, which is really dark, isn't it? They're both kind of dark, because Halloween kind of celebrates burning witches or drowning witches or whatever from the old days in America. And it's a dark time of the year, isn't it?
It's interesting, isn't it? As you said, the glorification of Guy Fawkes and the overall attempt to change the course of British history and the ultimate failure and what happened to him afterwards, which was fairly gruesome without going into explicit details. Our family here, without diverging too much from the tech, also don't really do too much in the front of Halloween trick-or-treating and whatnot. We do more of these sort of traditional, or not traditional, but home games. If you play, like, you make a mound of flour and you have to extract the coin from the flour with your mouth, then hilarity ensues as the flour goes everywhere, and those sorts of games.
Yeah, we had a little Halloween party here, which was nice because my sister-in-law brought round, here's the tech, she brought round a projector, and the idea is you project it onto a screen that you hold up, that you pin up in the window, and then the projector will scare people outside because of the gruesome side, sort of GIFs, video loops that are played onto it. Unfortunately, if you don't get the focus right, it just looks like a mess. And that's what happened here.
Well, that could be horrifying just in itself.
Well, for people,
poor video quality.
absolutely. For those of us, the video files among us with their 4K TVs, absolutely right.
Yeah.
I was actually walking through an electronics store the other day, a branch of Currys in the UK, and I happened across, I think it was an 8K television, and it was a close-up at this point of a man's face, and you could see all of the pores of his cheekbones. Yeah, I think that's too much resolution.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I remember the first sort of time seeing just a 4K and being a bit sort of mind blown with the quality and the amount of skin and the texture of people's skin, especially on sort of documentaries where they're zoomed quite close, and panning across their faces and whatnot, and suddenly being, ooh, it's a bit graphic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit unnecessary, isn't it? But that's not why we're here. You may notice from the slight echo in my voice that I'm in a slightly different place to when I usually record the Really Useful Podcast. I've just moved into a new building on my property and set up to work in at the moment. And this is something people have been doing increasingly over the past sort of 18 months with the whole work from home initiative that various governments have been supporting as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. Kitchens, spare rooms, attics, basements, sheds, they've all been sort of roped in and repurposed as workplaces. Are you still at the kitchen table, Gavin?
No. I have an office inside the house. I'm occupying the third bedroom, smallest of the bedrooms, but it is of a reasonable size. However, as the children continue growing, as they do tend to do,
Yep.
I am increasingly facing the pressure to move out of this room into an outdoor facility.
I have done that, and there are, and many other people have done it before me, and they've probably done it with a lot more confidence and vigour than I did, and maybe they ran into problems along the way. I certainly have. And so we're kind of just generally talking about the whole work from home, finding a space angle in this week's Really Useful podcast. And there are some technological issues to overcome after all. I think the first aspect of this is finding the space that works for you, isn't it? Because, I mean, I've spent, God, far too long, 6 years probably working at a kitchen table. And it's probably being some of the toughest working that I've done over the years, because there are some restrictions when you have a family. If you don't have a family, working at the kitchen table is fine. Just, get your laptop out, do your work. End of the day, put your laptop away, go and watch, Netflix and chill or whatever. When you've got a family, the kitchen table is the focal point of the household, and things are a lot more difficult. So having a space that you can just go to and shut the door behind you and be relatively confident that you're not going to be disturbed, because, tables are used for a lot of things. That's quite good.
I at the start of my sort of writing career did the same. I sat at the dining room table in our previous house, I think, for a good sort of 4 or 5 years, and you do sort of get used to the noise and the sometimes interruptions and what not happens when you're in that sort of space. But also, there's no way you can not also be distracted by it, if you see what I mean. You can get good at trying to ignore it, but if there's stuff going on in the corner of your eye, or you've got your headphones on but there's still a lot of background noise, it's still going to affect your ability to concentrate on your work over a longer period, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's it can be really, really, really distracting. Um, just sitting there when someone else is watching TV. If there's just two of you there, like my wife will watch films during the day, or whatever. She might be ironing, she might be reading a magazine at the same time, or on Facebook at the same time, updating her professional social page, whatever. But a movie might be on, and I might just, what I might do is a bit like what I'm doing now, wear headphones and hope for the best. Listen to some music, try and block it out. But other times, if something catches my eye, then my head will suddenly start turning around to the television, and that's not productive in the slightest, unless your aim for production is watching television.
Well, absolutely. If you're pretending to take notes on a film for an unrelated job, it could work. Finding a space within your home that you can create, I guess, more of a unique or purpose-built sort of office area is definitely important, though, even if that is like a single desk or table that you put in a separate room that does have a bit more peace and seclusion to it, rather than trying to sort of, slum it on the kitchen table, where, you are likely to meet interruption.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, unlike you, I actually started off in a spare bedroom, then moved to the kitchen because we have quite a small house. So we got to the point where my son and my daughter, who are twins, needed to have separate rooms. And but unbeknownst to us, there was another one coming along a couple of years after this decision was made. So it's become ever more hectic. But having just that little room at the top of the house was probably the best home office experience for me, in my opinion. It's just, I think, because everything's there, unlike this, which we'll kind of come to where I'm working now. When you find a space in the house, it's very easy to plug a laptop in, or plug a computer in, plug a printer in, connect them to the network. When things moved outdoors, or even if they moved into an attic or into a basement, things become a little more difficult because there's not necessarily any power, there's not necessarily any internet connection or network.
Yeah, I guess that is definitely one of the biggest issues you would face, isn't it? So if you're thinking about like a garden office or similar, top of your list has presumably got to be how are you going to get internet to where you want to work from?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, when I had an office at the top of the house, it didn't have a great internet signal, sadly. And what we ended up doing was the cheapest option that we had at that time, because there was actually a cable internet port in the room, but I didn't have the money for another router. So what we ended up doing was power line adapters. And incredibly, I am using the same power line adapters now in this building. Now, what's interesting about that is I didn't think this was going to work at all. We had a power supply, an external point set up, and this was then run through a trench up the garden to this building, which is going to be used for all sorts of things, not just, it's calling it a building, it's not as big, it's only like 10 by 8. It's also going to be used by my wife for crafting and things. So it's a general sort of like getting stuff done room. Now, because there's a fuse on the external wall, and there's also a fuse in this building, and power line adapters famously don't work very well when trying to cross circuits. But this is working perfectly fine. I've lost about 15% of the speed from inside the house. So we're talking about, I'm still getting 90 megabits per second,
Well,
which is
that's really good,
it's
like compared
fantastic.
to what you would think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Now, the reason this is particularly vital and particularly exciting and has saved me tons of money, considering I had to pay for this to be built, I could have then had to spend like £200 for networking solutions. I'd been through a whole host of solutions for connecting the garden office environment to the house and to the main router. These things included routing Ethernet cables behind skirting boards, setting up a little switch under a kitchen cabinet, and then having a more robust Ethernet cable running out of the house, following the path of the electric cable into the building. Another one was to use power line adapters in the house to get to an external wall, and then connect a Wi-Fi broadcast sort of a repeater that runs on PoE, Power over Ethernet, which I was really quite excited about because I haven't really tried Power over Ethernet.
Mm.
And I mean, that was about £120, that solution. There was another one which was pretty much the same, but without the Ethernet. It was just sort of like repeating Wi-Fi from inside the house. And then there was the potentially expensive option of upping my mobile cap and using mobile internet. And I mean, that would have been really expensive because I use quite a bit of internet while I'm working. And so to be able to just use power line adapters to solve this has been absolutely fantastic. It's also got me in here about a week earlier than it would have done.
Oh, so that's excellent. So do you think that that has anything to do with the quality of the wiring that you've put in? Because obviously power line adapters use the electrical cabling inside your house, and this
Yeah.
is not just for Christian, this is for anybody. And the quality of your electrical wiring can have quite a big impact on the amount of data and the speed that you receive, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is very thick. Certainly the cable from the house to the building is very thick cable. It's very thick, durable cable that's designed to go in a trench. And the wiring in the build was it's all been done by professionals. The building's been built by professional joiners and builders, and the plastering's done by a professional plasterer, and the electrics have been done by Pro Electrics. As I say, there's brand new fuse box above me, one on the exterior wall of the house. And yeah, I think the quality of the electrical work is definitely playing a massive part in this.
So that's interesting, isn't it? So it gives anybody with the opportunity to move out into a nice garden office or like that. It shows how much more it's worthwhile going and trying to do it to the best possible quality that you can, because the benefits of getting the internet out there, like you said, much faster and with a much greater quality is going to be so much better than anything else.
Absolutely, because I mean, you could just run an extension lead to your shed, but you're definitely not going to get the same level of power line adapter. And running an extension cable to your shed is kind of the very cheapest way of doing it. We actually knocked down the shed in order to build this, and the shed that we knocked down was, I mean, it would have fallen down itself in the next storm anyway. There's no way I could have used that.
That would not have been very good at all. Oh gosh, yeah, we've cleared a space in our backyard to try and build up a garden office at some point, probably more towards next spring and summer at this point. And considering how to run the power and the internet out there has been sort of top of the list, so I was looking at using possibly an extender at one point, which I think you talked about a moment ago, but realizing that the extender probably wouldn't deliver nearly enough internet connectivity compared to how much you kind of use on your day to day, even if you're just doing like low level computer work or just word processing and whatnot. You do tend to have a few browser tabs open, don't you?
Yeah.
And maybe a YouTube video and Spotify and so on and so on. And if you decrease your internet capability by even a small amount, you do suddenly notice it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you do. I mean, it's one of those things you can't really go back from, isn't it? Once you've like stepped up your internet speed, you anything after that that's slower just feels like it's wasting your time.
Yeah, stepping back into the sort of early 90s and the whirring and gurgling of the dial-up modem.
Oh, God, Lord. Yeah, let's not go back there. So I mean, if you are looking at a way of building your office in an outbuilding, then those are things that you do need to consider. When we're heading into the house, things are a little different. Attics and basements are probably the key areas for, or maybe even under the stairs cupboards. I used to know a guy who was quite good friends with him. He built a recording studio in an under the stairs cupboard.
Wow. I guess you can get quite good soundproofing in there, though.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, probably. Unfortunately, you can't get anyone else in there, so it's not really great for bands.
A one-man band with the drum on the back and the.
There wasn't even enough room for that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, interesting.
Have you? I mean, you've talked about you're going to clear a space outdoors. I was really keen on doing the office in the attic in our house, but we've got quite a bit of work that needs doing up there before we can even consider putting any other sort of additional rooms up there. I'm just looking at it now. I have the benefit of this sort of room outdoors. I can look at up there one moment, and I can see that my neighbour's got much better tiles than I have. It's something
It's the thing with an attic room as well. Unless it's done sort of properly, you can. I mean, depending on the climate, but where I am and also where Christian is, we live in the lovely damp UK, and if you don't insulate your attic space properly, you can definitely start incurring some pretty horrible damp issues both in the attic and in the rooms directly below it. So it's definitely something you need to consider.
Yeah, not just insulate as well, aerate as well. There has to be that airflow.
Yeah,
through.
yeah, it's an in and out sort of thing, isn't it?
And we'll take a moment from our usual podcast proceedings to just remind you that the Really Useful Podcast can be found pretty much anywhere you find podcasts. So we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on Google Podcasts. We're hosted at transistor.fm, so you can find us there as well. We're also on YouTube and, of course, on makeuseof.com. Now, however you subscribe to the Really Useful Podcast and listen to us, it would be amazing if you could take a moment to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That will help us to find new listeners and take our podcast to ever greater heights. You'll find the link to our Apple Podcast page in the show notes. Thanks a lot. the key thing about attics is often they're not powered. There's probably electrics under the floorboard for the lights for the rooms below, but there's often no power up there. And similar with basements, there might be a light switch, there might be one or two power points, but they also probably need checking over before they're used because they probably haven't been used regularly over the years. And then you've got the problem of Wi-Fi. Now, the thing about Wi-Fi is that it doesn't tend to like going through floors because most basements, they're under a concrete floor, aren't they? Or a very thick wooden floor. And attics are usually beyond the range of Wi-Fi in any kind of substantial sort of way. You might be able to pick up your neighbour's Wi-Fi better, but your own Wi-Fi might not be so good. So then we're coming back to some of the things we talked about already as well, Wi-Fi repeaters and extenders and power line adapters. And power line adapters may not be the greatest solution here. This is turning into the power line adapter show slightly. But they may not be the greatest solution here. As I mentioned before, they don't usually work when crossing circuits. And basements and attics are almost certainly going to be on different circuits to the main part of the house. So if you connect a power line adapter by an Ethernet cable to your Wi-Fi router, then plug it into the wall and get your second power line adapter and plug it in your loft or your basement, and then you pair them up as you would normally according to the instructions. Connect the Ethernet cable, or expect if it's a Wi-Fi power line adapter, try and connect to it. You're going to find that it's crossing at least two circuits to get there, and it's going to reduce the quality of the data. You may not even get any data through it.
Yeah, that's a really tricky thing. And it's one of those you don't know what's going to happen until you've been out and bought the power line adapter and got it home and plugged it in, only to find that it may actually not work to begin with. I mean, I guess if you can borrow one from a friend, you can always try before you buy.
Yeah.
And I guess in many cases you can probably return things quite easily these days, but it's definitely a tricky situation to overcome. I think I would maybe suggest looking into a mesh Wi-Fi system. Have you thought about something like that? If you were going up into the attic or down below with the mesh Wi-Fi, I mean, it is kind of how it sounds. You have multiple sort of access points throughout your home, and they coat your entire home in glorious Wi-Fi signal, which sort of overlaps with each other without interfering with each other either. So if you had, say, two normal routers and you put them near each other, they may well not play nicely together, and it could cause you some internet issues. But with a mesh Wi-Fi system, they're programmed and built specifically to play very nicely together, and not cause you connection issues.
I think it's either got to be mesh or running an Ethernet cable into the room necessary, which means drilling holes, and then routing a cable as well, which generally doesn't go down well with spouses, I find.
No, definitely not. But I mean, if you want the internet and you need the internet and it's vital for your job, there's no way around some things, surely.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. It does kind of force your hand slightly if you do need internet access. Out comes the drill with a sort of 12-inch bit on it.
Yeah.
Bore
Darling, I just bought a brand new SDS. Here we go.
Now, if you we've talked about internal offices, and I mean some of this will duplicate for the exterior office. What I've done here is I've purchased a motion detection alarm with a PIN code and an arming button, and it runs on batteries, and eventually it'll be mounted on the wall and facing the door, and anyone comes in, then the alarm sounds once it's armed. And so it's a good idea to have an alarm for any sort of outbuilding at your house. And perhaps if you are working on sensitive materials, or if you simply feel that you need to maintain your privacy, an alarm on wherever your office is a good idea. Another thing is a security camera. It might be an external security camera, it might be an internal security camera, any kind of security camera that you can use to keep an eye on what's going on in your home office while you're away. Again, I mean, there's a certain level of paranoia around this, I suppose, but if you live alone, you may not need it because you may have cameras elsewhere. If you cohabit and in sort of like a flat sharing sort of way, then a security camera in your home office might be a good idea. If you have children who are want to wander around and touch things, having a security camera might be a good idea when that accidental I quit email gets sent.
It's more someone's accidentally poured a considerable amount of water onto a laptop or something similar, and the cat or the dog is being blamed.
Yes. Yeah, so having a security camera is useful. I'm not saying that you should be spying on the activities of your family in order to get to the truth in certain scenarios. What I'm saying is, particularly if you have an external office, then it's a very good idea to have some security procedures, secure doors and windows that lock, several kind of locking points on the doors, camera and alarm. And, just generally make sure everything that you keep in your office is secure.
Absolutely. So, do you have any security cam or anything at home, or are you going to install a cam in the new office as well?
I will be installing a camera in the office as well. We have a camera on the back wall of the house pointing at it as well. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah. So there's double coverage. Can you got double coverage? Double coverage. Let's call it. Sounds more sensible, doesn't it?
Camera works for me. But you could also, in general, not specifically you, sorry, but you could supplement any sort of camera coverage, I guess, with something like a Ring doorbell. If you have a front or rear-facing doorbell that you use, the Ring doorbells are quite handy in many ways as quite an easy solution for people to get some camera coverage that doesn't require much effort to set up, does it?
No, yeah, absolutely right there. I recently reviewed the Spot Cam doorbell, which works in a similar sort of way to Ring, and I installed that for my parents. And yeah, that's a really good solution for just keeping an eye on things, knowing what's happening, and getting an alert when the button's pressed.
So that's quite handy as well, isn't it? Because it comes straight through to an app on your phone, and you can see who's there, what they're doing. If it's, if it's the postman delivering a package, or if it's someone wearing a balaclava and trying to break and enter. So
yeah. There's a strange man at the door of my parents' house the other day. Turned out he was just delivering chips, but fish and chips. Yeah.
But looked very suspicious whilst doing it.
Well, he would look completely out of place. The usual visitors to my mum and dad are people of my mum and dad's age, or me. So,
yeah. This was quite good then as well for remote monitoring as well, which I guess is quite important if you do want to go, anywhere for more than a day. If you go on holiday or anything, you've got that peace and mind of security, knowing that at the very least you've got people on camera, and if you get pinged, you could phone the local authorities, police or what have you, to get round there pronto.
Absolutely, or at least get an insurance number.
Yeah, precisely. So things like that are so important. At least you've got the visual confirmation that something did happen and you didn't just put everything in a garage down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that pretty much rounds things up. You're looking for a new space to work in. Is it an outhouse? Is it a basement? Is it an attic? It probably shouldn't be the kitchen table. Once you've made your mind up, how do you network it? How do you power it? And how do you keep it secure? Hopefully we've answered all of your questions on that regard in this week's really useful podcast from makeuseof.com. We'll be back again with a new show next week. Until then, it's goodbye from us.